Hello, my friend. Welcome back. Today is a big day. We are getting into retinoids, one of the biggest topics in skincare. So important to get it right. I get questions about retinoids every single day online, on my social media platforms, on YouTube, from my patients, from my friends, from my family. So the reason for that is that retinoids like retinol, retinaldehyde, etc., are the GOAT of anti-aging. They are the greatest of all time. They have multiple beneficial effects for the skin, and you are no doubt hearing about them online left and right. And you might even be using one already, but you might not be sure. Is it the right one? Should I be using something different? Am I doing it right? Am I getting the most out of it? And if you're not using one already, you might be wondering, is it right for me? Should I be using one or should I avoid it? I've heard some problems with it, like the retinoid uglies, lots of peeling, lots of irritation, lots of problems with retinoid. Should I even be using one? So we're going to get into that today. And I'm going to be breaking down for you the different types of retinoids. So retinoid is a general category of ingredients. And within that, I'm going to break down the different specific ingredients, both over the counter and prescription, as far as prescriptions in the United States that goes. And you are going to know the difference between them and get a better idea of which one might be right for you. So if we haven't met, I'm Dr. Ray. I'm a board certified dermatologist. I help women all over the world in their 40s and 50s to look 10 years younger. And I have a passion for helping women in this age and stage of life, in those perimenopause and menopause years, because first of all, I am one of them. I'm 45 years old, and I have seen over and over again, including myself, how entering that stage of life really wreaks havoc on someone's skin. And you might have been experiencing those things as well, where you are seeing your skin change, you're seeing the fine lines and the dullness and the reactivity and the sagging and all the things. And it comes on very suddenly, it comes on very quickly. And it can be hard to know what to do about it. And you might be a bit overwhelmed with what you're seeing online. And that's what I'm here to help you with. Okay, so let's get into the retinoids. We're going to start out right off the bat by talking about the different types of retinoids, both over the counter and prescription. And then we'll get into how to use them and which one might be right for you. And I do want to preface by saying that there is a little bit of rhetoric out there saying that people in their perimenopause and menopause years, people over 40, should not be using retinoids because they just wreck your skin and because your skin is more sensitive now and dry, which that definitely may be, but that doesn't mean that you should not be using a retinoid. And to the contrary, you actually should be using a retinoid. This is the most crucial time to be using a retinoid because, like I said, it is the GOAT of anti-aging, the greatest of all time. You will not do better in terms of over-the-counter or even prescription topical anti-aging products, collagen building, and smoothing and helping with fine lines, helping with pigmentation. It has multiple beneficial effects. So yes, you can use it even when you're over 40 and you should be using it, but it's just a matter of getting the right one for you. Okay, so what are the over-the-counter retinoids? I'm gonna start with the retinol esters, and the most well-known of that one is retinol palmitate. And these are actually the most gentle, the most tolerated type of retinoid. The downside of them is that they are also the least effective and also not very well studied in terms of their effects on the skin for exfoliation and pigment improvement and collagen building and anti-aging. Okay, so this type of retinoid I really see as kind of the starter retinoid. Okay, so if you are someone who has sensitive skin, very sensitive skin, or if you've never used a retinoid before in your life, this is a good place to start. It's kind of the stepping stone. It's the gateway drug to the other retinoids, okay? So you wanna start there. And with retinol palmitate and the retinol esters, you're typically not gonna see a dose on there, and that's okay. The doses really haven't been well studied anyway, and it's okay if you don't see the dose of retinol palmitate on the packaging. So again, that is the most mild one, but also the least studied, least effective. It really is a stepping stone. So if you can get to the next type of retinoid, you really do want to do that. And the next one I'm going to talk about is retinaldehyde. And this type of retinoid, it is actually technically more potent than the third one, which is retinol. However, it's also been less studied for its anti-aging effects. So my preference is typically to aim for using a retinol eventually because again, it's been better studied for its anti-aging effects than retinaldehyde, but some people cannot tolerate retinol. It's a little bit more irritating than retinaldehyde, okay? So if we're going kind of a stepwise approach from lower to higher irritation potential and also desirability, then we are going from retinol palmitate to retinaldehyde to retinol. And again, this is my approach. You might see different opinions from different dermatologists online, but the reason I say this is, again, because I am always looking at the studies and the data, and retinol really has been the best studied over-the-counter retinoid for anti-aging purposes, okay? So I'm gonna go with that one as the most desirable one. Now, when you're using a retinaldehyde, there are different doses, and I always recommend when we're talking about the retinoids besides retinol palmitate or the retinol esters, is that you do look for the dose on the packaging. If there's no dose, you're just not really sure what you're getting, right? And the dose does matter. So my recommendation is always to look for a dose on the packaging. So with retinaldehyde, I would aim for a 0.05 to a 0.1%. And the next retinoid is retinol. And again, this is the one that's been best studied for anti-aging purposes. And again, dosing does matter. So I would go for a 0.5 to a 1% retinol if you can tolerate it. And then the fourth over-the-counter retinoid is adapalene. And adapalene classically is used more for unclogging pores and for acne. However, you can use it for anti-aging purposes as well. It just really has not been very well studied for that purpose. And as far as the United States, there are two doses of adapalene. There's the 0.1%, which is actually now over the counter. It used to be prescription, it is now over the counter. And there's also the 0.3%, which is prescription. And if we're going for those anti-aging purposes, again, it's not very well studied. There are just a couple of studies on that, but they're looking at the 0.3%. And so I would aim for a 0.3% adapalene if you are going to use that. In general, though, I would say adapalene I reserve for people who we are treating for clogged pores or acne rather than having an anti-aging effect. Okay, so that brings us to the prescription retinoids, adapalene 0.3% we talked about, and then Treitnoin is the next one that's kind of next step in terms of potency and also irritability potential. So Treitnoin is the best known prescription retinoid, I would say. You're probably seeing it all over the internet, online, and when people talk about prescription retinoids, they're usually talking about Treitnoin, or Retin-A is kind of the brand name, the old school brand name for it. And again, dosing does matter. So with Treitnoin, the doses that have been better studied for their anti-aging potential are the 0.05 and the 0.1%. And the last retinoid is tazarotene. That comes also in a 0.05 or a 0.1%. And it is, again, a bit more potent than the Treitnoin and also has a bit more potential for irritation for some people. I will say there is a 0.45% tazarotene on the market as well that is a branded version of it and is very similar to the 0.05% in terms of its potency. Okay, so now we've got the breakdown of all the different types of retinoids. And so now, which one do you use? Are you even more confused now? I don't blame you if you are. So which one to use is something that, first of all, will be dependent on a few things, but also it can be fluid, okay? So it can change over time. It is a bit nuanced because the skincare routine really has to work cohesively together and also, of course, tailored to your skin type, okay? And especially in our 40s and our 50s, when our skin is changing, it is a bit more dry, it's a bit more dehydrated, it's more reactive, and it needs more TLC, and just mixing and matching products really doesn't work as well anymore. So it really is a comprehensive approach, and it is something that I help people with in my program, like I said. And if you are interested in learning more about that, then I would probably join our newsletter because you are going to get information about it periodically in there. I send out one newsletter once a week with some really fun tidbits and tips in there. And I'll put the link to sign up for that in the description for this video below, or you can also just email us hello@drray.com. But I will give you some general guidelines in this video that you can start to apply, and hopefully that will help you in terms of knowing where to go with this, okay? So if you are someone who has very sensitive skin, maybe you have rosacea, or maybe you have eczema, or maybe you just have very highly reactive skin, and you know that different products on your skin, even like the sensitive skin type products, still can cause a reaction in your skin. Or if you have never used a retinoid before, then it is highly advisable to start with the most gentle retinoid, the retinol palmitate. That is going to be your best bet for not overdoing it right off the bat, okay? And then if you are already on a retinoid, let's say you've already been using one, if you have been using that retinoid for at least 8 weeks and you are still not seeing improvement in your texture, like your skin should be feeling smooth when you run your hand over it, should be feeling nice and soft and smooth. If you're not seeing improvement in the radiance of your skin, like the light is bouncing off better when your skin is moisturized, if you're not potentially seeing improvement in fine lines too, because you should be seeing some improvement in fine lines, not for everybody, but I would say for the vast majority of people with consistent use of a retinoid, fine lines, not deep wrinkles, but fine lines should be slowly increasing over time. And pictures are really helpful to document that. If you're not seeing improvement in those, or if you're not seeing improvement in pigmentation like sunspots or dark spots, caveat is you might need additional pigment correcting, pigment improving ingredients beyond retinoids to see improvement in pigmentation, but in some cases retinoids can improve in pigmentation. So that's kind of the caveat, but in general, you should be seeing improvement in the texture and the radiance of your skin. But if you're not, then it is probably time to use a more potent retinoid to go up to the next step. So again, if you're already using a retinoid and you've been using it consistently, we'll talk about that in a moment, what that means, for at least 8 weeks and you're not seeing improvement in your skin, then it is probably time to start thinking about transitioning to a more potent one. So you will only transition up to the next step retinoid if you're already tolerating your current retinoid every day or at least most days of the month. Okay, so you should not be having to take 2 or 3 days off per week to tolerate your retinoid. If you do, then you might be on the wrong retinoid and you might either need to step that down or you might just need to adjust the other products in your routine to make your retinoid more tolerable, okay? So if you're not able to tolerate your retinoid every single day or at least almost every single day, then you're not moving up. But if you are, then you can move up to the next step retinoid. And then here's a ninja way to work up to that next step retinoid, which is that you continue on your current retinoid, but you alternate it every other night with your new next step retinoid. And you do that for at least a few weeks, okay? So that's giving you a little chance for your skin to adapt, to start getting used to the new one, to tolerate the new one, make sure you're doing okay with that one before you go full force into the new retinoid, okay? So if you have some still left of your old retinoid, then yeah, work it in slowly, work the new one in slowly by alternating every night. And then after a few weeks, if you're doing fine, if your skin is not overly peeling or irritated, sensitive, red, itchy, all those things, then you can go straight to the new retinoid every night. Now, if you are retinoid naive, like you've never used one before, or you're just not currently using one and you're working it back into your routine, then you do want to start your retinoid fairly slowly. And so a good way to do that is to start every other night, no more than that. And you do that for a minimum of 2 weeks, okay? And then after that, if you're doing fine, your skin's tolerating just fine, then you can work it up. And you can go a little bit more conservatively, especially if you are someone with slightly more sensitive skin. I would then go to maybe like 5 nights a week and see how you do with that. And then from there, after a couple of weeks, you can go to 7 nights a week, okay? But if you feel like your skin is a little bit more hardy, it can handle a lot, you'll start that every other night, but then after a couple of weeks, you can just go to every night. And then where do you actually use it in your routine? Is it the first step? Is it the last step? So retinoids in general, first of all, you want to use at night. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them are degraded by UV radiation. So adapalene is the exception, and retinaldehyde typically isn't degraded by UV radiation either. However, in general, nighttime's a good time to use retinoids. And which step in your routine, this is how I want you to think about it. Use the thinner to thicker rule, okay? So when you're applying your products, whether it's morning or evening, in general, you're gonna work from the thinner products to the thicker products. So thinner might be a toner, for example, which if you watched my previous videos, you might know I'm not a big fan of toners. However, let's say you're using one, then you would use a toner first, and then you would go to a serum, and then to a lotion, and to a cream, okay? So those are the steps in terms of thinner to thicker. So if you're using a retinoid serum, then you would use that earlier in your routine. If you're using a retinoid lotion or a cream, you would use that after any other serums that you're using. What if you're using a retinoid serum and other serums at the same time? For example, like a peptide serum or a hydrating serum. In general, my recommendation typically is to use the peptide or hydrating serum first and then follow up with the retinoid. It just kind of gives your skin a little bit more of a buffer with the retinoid, so it's not as irritating. And always, 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 you do want to moisturize your skin. Even if you're on the oilier skin side, I highly recommend you moisturize your skin every single night after your retinoid. and in the morning as well. And on that note, it's also really important to do really good sun protection when you're using any retinoid, because they can make your skin more sensitive to the sun. And so some people take that to mean that they can't use a retinoid if they're outside a lot. I live and practice in Southern California, and I have surfers who are on prescription retinoids with appropriate use and with appropriate sun protection. So that's the key, okay? So anybody can use a retinoid. Again, it's about finding the right one for your skin and also adequately protecting from the sun. And so here's a really good hack for increasing the tolerability of your retinoid, especially if you're wanting to use a stronger one. And that is to use a barrier repair cream at night. And I have a couple that I love, and I will link to those in the description for this video below. But that really does help make your skin tolerate things more easily. It helps fortify your skin barrier. They're extra hydrating. So they really help eliminate or prevent those retinoid uglies, that peeling that can happen, and the excessive dryness that can happen, and the irritability and all of that, okay? So that is a good hack. Now, if you are someone who is prone to pimples, then it could make you break out. So you want to be cautious with that, maybe avoid it, or maybe just kind of work it in slowly and see how you do. And then the last thing I want to say is that it really is helpful and important, I think, to not do all of this in a vacuum, okay? So what that means is that you're trying to do it all on your own, okay? Especially when you are in this stage of life, the 40s, the 50s, perimenopause, menopause, whatever you want to call it. When our skin is in this stage, it needs more. It needs more strategy. And when you're not just throwing things together and hoping for the best, is when you're going to have the best results, the most efficient results. You're not going to ruin your skin in the meantime, okay? So what I highly recommend is that you do get some feedback from a board certified dermatologist, okay? And again, this is something that I do in my program. I specifically created my program for women who are in this stage of life because I see how much they're struggling, and I really want to make it accessible to as many people as possible. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that, email us hello@drray.com, or just join our newsletter in the link below. Because when you are putting your routine together, including the retinoid that you're using, but also all the other products have to, again, work cohesively together and work well for you. That is extra important, and that is the kind of help that you get in my program. So what retinoid questions do you have? Put them in the comments. I love talking about this stuff. I love answering your questions. I love hearing from you. If you're not subscribed already, please do. I appreciate every single new subscriber. I hope you have a wonderful day. We will chat next week.